You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Thursday, August 25th, 2022. Today is also the feast day of King Louie of France. He was, of course, the king. He lived during the Crusades. And although he was very wealthy and could have lived a very selfish life, Louis, King of France, was focused on helping the poor and oftentimes invited the poorest of the poor to come have dinner with him. He led crusades into the Holy Land to reclaim the spots where Jesus lived and died after it was invaded by Muslim forces, and he died on his second trip in the Crusades. Now, this week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we are talking about the universal call to holiness, how we are all called to be holy, and if we accept that call, everyone, the world will be radically changed. Talked about how love is why we pursue holiness and go through all of this work and suffering. We talked about the practice of virtue, and today we're going to talk about the second point, which is prayer. Now, I like to think about it this way. The only way that we can understand prayer and practice prayer correctly is if we understand that prayer is having a relationship with Jesus. Now, if you have ever made a friend and then life changed, maybe you're not in that same class next year, or you're not playing the same sport, or you move away. So let's say you have a friend and then something happens where you can't be together anymore. You probably know what happens to that friendship. It ends. If you can't spend time with someone, if you never see them, if you never have time to speak with them or anything, you're not friends with them anymore. And the same is true with Jesus. If we just go to Mass on Sundays and the whole time we're totally distracted and we never make time for Jesus, we never speak to him, we never listen to him, then we basically have no relationship with him. And there's a gospel story, a parable, where there's a wedding and some silly bridesmaids don't have oil for their lamps. They run out, try to get some. They come to the feast later. They knock on the door, and the bridegroom answers, who we know symbolizes Jesus, and he won't let them in. And you know what he says to them? He says, I don't know you. I don't know you. And this is a wedding feast is a big symbol for heaven. Now, if we don't pray, we won't be saints simply because that is what Jesus will say to us when we knock on heaven's door and try to get in. He'll say, I'm sorry, I don't know you. We never talked. You never came. You never made time for me ever. And so that is what prayer is. Now, prayer can be tricky. Sometimes we can sit down in the quiet and not know what to say. There's a lot of different types of prayer. We can do prayers of thanksgiving, prayers of praise, petitions. We can even do prayers of lament, which are very common in the Psalms, where we complain to God. He just wants us to come and share our lives with him, because that is what we do when we are in relationship with someone. We share our lives. So if you are just getting started with prayer, I want to just let you know, 5 minutes a day is a great place to start. If you're struggling to find those 5 minutes, I recommend the 5 minutes after you get in bed and the light's out and it's quiet. Those 5 minutes before you fall asleep. Start with a simple prayer like a Hail Mary or an Our Father, and then simply talk to God. He really does care about what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're looking forward to, what you're thankful for. Speak to him, and he will hear you. Now, if you want to go a little bit further in this, the next step I recommend is a journal, a prayer journal. It can be a simple notebook, but I find it really helpful if I have a big question I'm wondering about with God. God, why did you let that happen? God, what is the decision I should make here? God, where are you leading me? We all feel these questions. I'll write that question down, and then I'll maybe pray a little bit. I like to pray a rosary, but I'll pray and quiet myself. And then I just begin to write down all of the thoughts that I have, all of the feelings I'm feeling. I'll write those things down. And in the moment, those feelings might not feel super important. They might not feel like God is really even there answering me. But more often than not, when I go back and reread what I have written, I realize that God is there speaking. He's usually not saying, do this right now. He's usually telling me to trust. Trust, I'm here. Trust me, I know what you're feeling. I am there with you. And that is the greatest message that we can receive from a friend, isn't it? To say, I see you. You're doing great. Hang in there. Trust me, I'm here. So those are two real simple steps, but I want to encourage you this year as we go through the Be a Saint Kids Club, prayer has to be part of it. This has to be about Jesus. It has to be. So I challenge you today to do one of those two things I described, to either take the 5 minutes when you're laying in bed before you fall asleep to say a simple prayer and speak to God, or if you want to go a little further, to do the journal. Write a question, quiet yourself, and record the thoughts you have, because Jesus is there and he does want to speak to you. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be. Just one more thing, Sprouts. I hope that you are planning to join us for the Be a Saint Kids Club, which launches on September 1st. Starting on that day, this podcast will sound a little bit different as we endeavor to become saints. Our first saint that we are talking about is Blessed Carlo Acutis, who will spend the whole month reminding us the powerful gift that we have in the Eucharist. To sign up to join us, simply check the notes for this podcast episode to find the direct link.
This show is a production of the Spoke Street Media Podcast Network. For more great podcasts, visit spokestreet.com.